1 minute past, which is amazing because my laptop was still playing Windows updates 2 minutes ago.
To be honest, 1 minute past, I think that might be the earliest we've ever joined.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I'll just come to my laptop and everything will be fine. I forgot it was Patch Tuesday. And my laptop switched off and the update hadn't applied properly. And yeah, fun and games, joys of IT, right?
Yep.
And now I have some other things. Anyway, welcome to another adventure. So this time we are joined by Lisa in her home again. After her adventures in the jungle and like I don't know how high, but pretty darn high. And
I tell you what, the jungle was hard, like a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And I know I like text you before, and I was like, "This is going to be horrible." It was worse than that. It was way more horrible than that. Like I think I'd sort of researched. I sort of like knew it was going to be a bit difficult, but then when you're actually there, you're like, I just can't survive this. Like this isn't survivable. It was really hard, really, really hard, but it was interesting.
You do it again.
The jungle, I don't know actually. Like it was really epic, but it was so hot, so humid. The entire place smells like a compost heap. And like to say there are a lot of mosquitoes, like I can't quantify. It's almost to the point at night where you're like, I can't breathe in because I will breathe in mosquitoes. Like the air is now just mosquitoes. So it's a lot. I'm not sure, but I did go fishing for the first time I've ever been fishing, and I caught piranhas.
Oh, I froze there for a second. I don't know if it was me or you.
Yeah. Yeah, I went fishing. First time I've ever been fishing. Caught piranhas. Epic.
Did you eat one?
No, I didn't have the guts to eat one, to be honest. Like when you see their teeth, you're like, oh, I don't know about this. This is something else. Like their teeth are insane. Their teeth are insane. So yeah, I'm now an officially piranha fisher expert on LinkedIn. I'm gonna put that as my experience.
Yeah, thought leader in piranha fishing.
Yeah, award-winning piranha fisher. Congratulations, so well deserved.
Yeah, how are the mountains? It looks like you had quite an adventure there as well.
Yep, already started planning my next adventure, to be honest, because I'm not really able to just not have an adventure planned. I think it's probably a deep-seated psychological issue that I have that I'm refusing to deal with through the means of travel. But yeah, so that'll be fun.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds interesting. You want to say where you're going, or is that going to be a surprise?
I am going to Mongolia.
It's going to be interesting. Looks very beautiful there. But yeah, there are some challenges, I imagine, with certain governments around the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you no doubt are going to enjoy it. Cool. And yeah, so I think we don't really have an agenda for this one. But there was one thing that we did say that we were going to definitely talk about. I forgot what it was. It was something around
super important, like high priority issue.
Insider threats or something.
Oh yeah, we did say we were going to talk about insider threats. But before we do that, I sort of feel what we have to talk about is MGM and Caesar's entertainment group, and the shenanigans that are going on over there at the moment, because obviously that's been the topic of the week, right? Really, wrongly or rightly.
It was Black Hat and DEF CON. They are to blame.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that as well.
Apparently.
Yeah, I've heard that too, along with a lot of other theories. I'm not totally sure what the theories are based off of, given that MGM haven't disclosed what happened, but who knows?
Yeah.
So I think, do you want to like touch on kind of how it started or played out, or should we just?
You know far more than I do. I just know they got breached, ransomware, and things aren't going well.
We don't really know what's happened at the moment. So all we know at the moment is that on, I think, Sunday, MGM started looking like it was offline. So rooms were not accessible or lockable, shall I say. Slot machines were offline. There were TikToks. I mean, most of us were informed for the first time from TikTok, to be honest, more than anything else. Everything looked very ransomware-y. Since then, there still hasn't been any explicit description of what's happened. What we do know is that a lot of what was pulled down by MGM's team, not by ransomware. So I suppose what's happened is something has happened, and then from a containment perspective, they've started pulling things offline. We have heard from Alpha V, who are a famous ransomware group, that they claim to have attacked them. But again, there's very patchy information coming from anyone who actually knows. And a lot of what people think has happened has been hypothesized by people who haven't really got any insight to it.
What, you mean they're on facts?
Yeah, very low on facts. Lots of opinions.
Yeah, I think this is also the industry trend. When something happens, an outage happens, it's immediately, oh, it's a cyber attack. Well, there's a lot of other things that could go wrong. And in
Right.
this case of NGM, maybe pointing towards it, but we still don't know. It's still possible that there's something else. Unlikely if they're pulling other systems down. But the point is, we shouldn't speculate. Rather wait for the facts to come out. It just makes their lives a lot harder. I mean, at the end of the day, you got humans working on this, and probably stress levels way up there,
Mm-hmm.
and making all the speculation and things on Twitter and that is not really helping the situation.
No.
Rather be there to help them and support them than just throw wild accusations out there, such as the things like, "Oh, there was Black Hats and DEF CON, so it must have been them." Well, maybe. I don't think that's going to be the case, but we have no evidence of such other than there was a conference and this happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. Wasn't there also Caesars that was also impacted,
Yeah.
and then they reported that they
Well,
were affected by ransomware?
they have paid the ransom.
Yeah,
They have said that, or certainly that's what's being reported. They have said. I actually did a post. I'm just trying to bring it up on LinkedIn that about it, because actually the interesting thing for me is not that they paid the ransom, because I think 86% of organizations pay, so that's not that
yeah,
interesting. 15 million they paid, so they got it down from 30 million, which was the original asking price. Again, for someone like that, I don't think that's a massively shocking amount of money. It's
uh,
probably what they earn in a weekend,
yeah,
or close there too. What was interesting though, and I posted about this on LinkedIn, so you can read the whole thing, was their statement that they put out when they declared that they'd paid the ransom. And actually, I think they've done a really good job with this statement. It's so transparent, it's so thorough. Someone really clever has put this together because it's masterful. And I posted on LinkedIn, like, if this isn't in your comms templates, download this statement and put it in your comms templates because it's really, really good. I'll just read you the one bit that I thought was really good. So they're talking about how they paid the ransom, and this is part of their announcement that they paid it. They said, we've taken all the steps we can to ensure that the stolen data is deleted by the unauthorized actor, although that we cannot guarantee this result. We are monitoring the web and have not seen any evidence that the data has been further shared, published, or otherwise misused. And they go on to describe what they're doing to monitor whether or not that data gets deleted or not. And I just thought, they've really, like, you can tell their comms team has really spoken to their cybersecurity team, because they clearly understand what this looks like and what dark web monitoring is and stuff. And so often you see tragic comm statements where you're just like, they don't know what this is at all. So
yeah, yeah. That's what I think many organizations completely miss is you need to have effective communications. You
mm-hmm.
can have the world's best IR and the world's best um, cleanup and all of that. But unless you have effective comms, you're not going to get the trust of your customers back.
No. No,
And it
exactly.
also shows you've got stuff to hide. Like, for instance, on RC, there's murmurings around LastPass.
Mhm.
Seen that?
No, I haven't.
So apparently, and again, this is speculation, so treat it with a pinch of salt, but it does point to that there's a bunch of cryptocurrency people who've had their wallets emptied. uh, the wallets or something to do with cryptocurrency. In fact, there was a whole blog written about it. The name escapes me. Damn, why is his name escaping me? He's a really famous blogger.
Brian Krebs?
Yes, Brian Krebs. I don't know why.
The
Friday
famous
afternoon.
blogger.
Yeah, sorry, my brain's not functioning. He's actually written up a whole thing on it, around people having very strong secure passwords. So there's no way that their passwords could be brute forced. And the only conclusion they came to is they had their passwords in LastPass. So
Yeah.
whether that has some bearing, there's no direct evidence. And again, speculation. So we shouldn't jump to conclusions until we have the full evidence. But again, why things around IR and your messaging is so important. Because let's face it, they didn't do a very good job, and they've kind of
No.
opened themselves up for speculation like this. And they weren't very clear on the onset, and it was more a kind of exercise in damage control rather than being open and honest.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they did a better job than Capita. I mean, whoever gets breached, really, if you get breached this year, you're going to have to do a really bad job to be the worst breach of the year in terms of that. They set the bar pretty high for achieving that, I would say. But yeah, it's really interesting with the casinos, and we'll see what happens and what plays out. But obviously, my job predominantly is like helping companies prepare for a cyber attack, right? So this topic comes up a lot, and it's very irritating for me when I see people in infosec basically doing the attacker's work for them and promoting the entire thing. And it's all like with this slant of like, oh, you know, this will be the biggest ransom payment ever, oh my god, they shouldn't pay this, passing all this judgment based of absolutely zero fact. And what you don't really realize is inside MGM resorts there's a comms team who are losing their mind, who are not sleeping, who aren't seeing their family, who are so stressed trying to deal with this situation, and you've just made it so much worse for them when you could have just been quiet and waited to say, well, we'll wait to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, look at the Caesar thing, and Caesar's a big chain, or well known, and they paid a fairly sizable portion. That didn't really come to light, or
No.
much happened there. So yeah, it's interesting how some of these things get blown up, and at the same time, I do wonder if it's a kind of thing of trying to get more attention on things like social media and that,
Mm-hmm.
or just getting stuck in the excitement of all of it. But yeah, a part of me wants to kind of feel that some of it is attention seeking, and just trying to blow things up more than they actually really are. At the end of the day, what's happened to MGM has happened to loads of other companies. It's not anything special.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, my door's going off. Apologies.
Someone is at the door.
Yeah, good old technology letting you know.
Someone from LastPass is at the door.
Yeah, it's the FBI or somewhat. Not, don't talk about breaches. But interesting. Another kind of side segue from the MGM thing is the question of ransomware. We're not saying MGM's ransomware, but so Caesars, for example, where we do know they paid that ransomware. So the big question is, do you pay or don't you pay? And I think too many just assume it's a black and white answer,
Mm-hmm.
where there's so many different caveats to it.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so many roads that you can go down. Why don't you kick off with some of your thoughts on that?
Well, actually, I was at a summit the other day, a conference, and a CISO of a very large bank turned to me and he said, there's one way I know how well read cybersecurity people are on the ransomware threat. There's one question I can ask, and the answer to that question will tell me exactly what I need to know about how knowledgeable they are. And I said, okay, what's the question? And he said, I say to them, do you think we should pay the ransom? And if not, why not? And he said, if they say to me, no, and then their answer is, because you're funding criminals and you can't trust criminals and criminals aren't true to their word and this, that, and the other, if that's their answer, he was like, they know nothing about it. They know nothing about it at all. They're not well read on it. That's it. And he's like, if they say it's complicated and it's a business decision and, you know, there are so many that pay, and if you're, you know, and they've considered the pros and cons of it, then they understand the situation. But the people who immediately just go, absolutely no, under no circumstances, it's immoral, you're funding criminality, don't understand it. And I thought that is such a good way to appreciate it, because I used to be in law enforcement, right? So in terms of people who are indoctrinated into saying don't pay criminals, I am probably one of the top people in the industry for being brainwashed into thinking that's the only way forward. But my experience in working in this kind of field that I do is that actually it's so complicated. It is so complicated. And if you're looking at, for one, insurance companies usually pay, right? Because the damage is just literally a cost comparison. Is it more costly to recover manually, or is it more costly and pay the lawsuits, or is it more costly to pay the ransomware group? It's always more costly to do it manually. But in terms of the sort of attitudes of the boards, it's a business decision. It's not a moral decision. You can't make it a moral decision, because if you do that and you say absolutely no way can you pay the ransom, one, you're condemning that company, probably, right? Two, I think also you have to start really thinking about the things you do and the things you consume in your life. Because if your concern is that you've ever funded organized crime, you probably shouldn't have a laptop. You probably shouldn't be wearing diamonds if you're a woman. You shouldn't be, you know, there's a lot of things that you probably shouldn't be doing, countries you shouldn't be going to, because indirectly you're funding organized crime. That's not to say anyone wants to fund organized crime. I think that's what the other side think. They think if you say, then there's sometimes you should pay the ransom, that somehow in some distorted world, you're saying it's great to pay organized crime. No one wants to do that.
I kind of play the more cynical approach. So yes, in my view, you are paying criminals and you are funding them to go on and perform more
Sure.
attacks and attack more organizations.
But no one wants to do that. That's not anyone's goal when they pay a ransom. It's not to fund organized crime is like the dream.
It's not, but I think where the area comes into it is where companies who just totally disregard that and don't even think about that. They just go, this is the cheapest option. We're not going to worry about any of the moral dilemmas of this, and we're going to go down that road because, you know what, it makes us look less bad, and it's the cheaper option. I think that's kind of where it gets a bit tricky, and that's where I view payments to be a bit, you have to decide, like, there's not just the business aspect, there's the moral dilemma as well. If you're going to just completely throw your morals out the window and go, you know what, we are a multi-billion pound national company and it's a little pittance to us, so, and it'll be far cheaper for us to do this than kind of ignore the criminals and restore backups and all that kind of stuff. We're going to go ahead with this route. Now, I'm not saying that's completely wrong, but if they're just going to go down that route without even considering the moral implications, then yeah. I think some companies have a bit of an obligation to make sure that they think of all these things through properly, rather than just go head first. We're just going to pay and not take those things into consideration.
Yeah. I think in my experience, that's really rare though. Like majority of the time, there is a really long discussion about what we should do, what's the right thing to do, balancing the risk as well, because there's
Yep.
risk attached to both courses of action. So how do we balance that? The cost, the reputational issue, all of this stuff gets considered and debated. And usually this takes a long time. It's not a quick decision where they're just like, oh,
Yeah.
well, screw it, we'll pay. And I think that's what people think on Twitter. So it's really irritating when you're like, no, you don't understand how long they've been talking about this. And they still probably aren't sure they've made the right decision.
Yep.
It's a really difficult situation, and that's why that CISO's comment really struck to me, that that's how I know how much you know about ransomware, by asking that question. And I thought it's so true, because anyone who's just like always pay or always don't pay doesn't understand it.
Yeah, it's kind of like the same thing with terrorists and holding kidnappers or hostages,
Yeah.
pay or not pay. Kind of same thing. Do you pay them and save people, or do you fund them to go on create further atrocities? So it's not an easy yes or no answer, and there's
No.
so many caveats to it. Um, yeah, it's certainly something worth having a discussion in your organization before it ever happens,
Mm-hmm.
as to what are the things that you're going to look at in order to help determine whether you're going to pay or not.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
understand that it's not the CISO who makes that decision.
no,
That's definitely not who makes that decision.
no,
It's probably the board.
board,
It might be the CEO and CFO, depending on how small the company is, but it's almost certainly not the CISO.
no.
So people who are like, oh, well, I 100% wouldn't pay. Great for you, not your decision. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, they might have an influence, but they're not going to be the ultimate decision
No,
makers.
totally not. So
So that
I think it's just about, when you read these things, just be a little bit kind, because they're not making this decision lightly at all, I can assure you. So appreciate that whatever you tweet and whatever you comment, if this happened to you, would you want to read those tweets?
be kind.
Be kind.
Unless the company's really, really obviously acting in bad faith, like
Or lying. If they're lying,
yeah,
it's fair
lying in bad
game.
faith.
Have
Yeah,
at it. But
but most don't, thankfully.
no.
So
No.
the other topic that we did raise that we were going to talk about was the insider threat stuff.
Oh, yeah.
There was a discussion on Twitter that you said this would be a good topic to
Mm-hmm.
talk about on this. I forgot what it was exactly. Can you remember?
It obviously resonated with you deeply.
Can't
As with all
remember.
my content, really, he remembers it so well. It was about, I wrote that it's not about whether you trust your employees, it's about who do they trust.
Okay, yeah.
And what I meant by that was, you might say, oh, we trust our employees completely, 100%. But if they don't have a good relationship with you, and they're slightly disgruntled or they're slightly aggrieved by their company, and someone online offers them money to do something, they might trust that person more than they trust you. So it's not about whether you trust them, it's about who do they trust.
Interesting. Now, there is a case that I can think of where that won't be a situation. Whether it's actually ever happened or not, I don't know. And that's extortion. So they
Mm-hmm.
may love the company, but imagine someone's like trying to threaten your family or that. Well, I don't love my company that much. I love my family far more. And that's
Yeah.
got nothing to do with trust. That's purely my position trying to do protection. So whether this has ever been a scenario, I don't know. I can't imagine that it ever hasn't, but again, I don't know if there's any confirmed cases. So if anyone's aware, it would be interesting to hear
Mm-hmm.
about those. But that's kind of a situation where I think turn on its head, like maybe they don't trust the company enough to go forward to the company and say, look, this is the position I've been put in. And hopefully, if anyone ever is in that position, I would hope that the company would be able to support them in such a position, because I could imagine it must be a terrible position to be in if that's ever the case. But yeah, insider threats is an interesting one. there's always that case of trust but verify and all of that kind of stuff, which to me kind of seems like a cop out because trust but verify. But I do see
Yeah.
the case in that. It's a very difficult one, and yeah, I it's kind of related to that tweet that I put out, that kind of put out this morning, and some people weren't quite happy with what I said there, where I said humans are the weakest link, and I don't mean that in a negative light, right? I'm not pointing the finger of blame. Humans make mistakes.
Hmm.
I've clicked on phishing emails. Doesn't mean that I'm terrible person and all of that, but I made a mistake, and humans aren't robots. Humans will make mistakes.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why I say we are the weakest link, because attackers know. If I go to a machine and it's doing what it's intended, there's no way I'm going to fail that machine. Yes, you could try to find ways around it, but there will be a lot of effort. Whereas a human, if you ask them 100 times, they're eventually going to slip up.
Yeah.
Um, and that's kind of like the insider threat as well, because a lot of people assume insider threat are just people doing malicious things. Insider threats is also humans who click on phishing emails. They're not malicious, but they just happen to be an internal employee who's accidentally clicked on something that they shouldn't have, and suddenly the business is compromised. And again, not their fault. Um, it's just the reality that we face. And
Yeah.
that's why you need to have appropriate controls and security around that. So if that does happen, you have further protections to mitigate a lot of the impact of that.
Yeah. And US CERT have done a lot of work on the insider threats, and there's two really interesting things that I want to just bring up. The first is they don't think we should use the term malicious at all, because malice implies like there's an element of anger and revenge in it that isn't true in a lot of insider threat cases. So they recommend that it's intentional and unintentional. So
Yep.
people who unintentionally make
Yep.
a mistake, cool. Then there's the intentional people who might not mean it because of malice, like you said, extortion, or that's still an intentional threat. You're
Yep.
intending to steal that data, but the motivation isn't necessarily malice. It
Yeah.
could be financial stresses, it could be health issues, it could be addiction, it could be all these things. So they say that's how you should split it, intentional and unintentional. The other thing that I think is really interesting from all the cases that they looked at intentional insider threats, in none of them were they just bad, evil people. In all of the situations, it was a culmination of things. So there was lots of things like people who had money troubles, people who had health issues, stress, they'd just divorced their partner, or all this stuff. And it caused a tipping point, like they had a fallout with their manager, and then they thought, you know what, sod this, I'm going to do this thing. It wasn't that they just woke up one morning and thought, right, that's it, I'm going to destroy my company. Like, it was always a culmination of things that led to the point where you just like, I've had enough, I can't deal with it anymore. You do something stupid. And that I thought was really interesting because, as you said, with regards to controls, that means that there's a period of time where you could spot something was wrong if you had employee support programs in place.
Yeah. And this is why I always like monitoring employees is not how you do it.
No.
As I say, you don't monitor people, you monitor their behaviors. And by that is like if someone's coming in at midnight on a Saturday, and then downloading a massive amount of files, that should be immediately something flagged. It's not saying that
Right.
necessarily doing something bad, but that should mean you should go and go ask them questions like,
Yeah.
"Hey, we noticed you were doing this. What's up?" And then they can explain that. And then also monitoring, like if they're visiting other sites that maybe they shouldn't have. That could be potential personal problems, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Rather than, yeah, we're going to install this software on your computer that's going to spy on you
Yeah.
and use your webcam and all of that dodgy stuff.
Yeah.
'Cause
And I
that's
think also like some of it is also just because they don't really know, like they intend to do it, but they don't really know the consequences. Like I had
Yep.
a client who was a big manufacturer, and on their manufacturing systems, which were segmented from the rest of the corporate network, and they've obviously got PLCs and SCADA systems on this network. This guy was downloading games, he was downloading like all this stuff to play, but on that production network. And they were like, oh my God, this is so bad. And he was gambling, he was doing all this stuff, but he just didn't know. Like,
Yeah.
he intended to put it on the network, but he didn't know the consequences that this could potentially have on the, and then you, I guess like you were saying, you have to ask, well, how was he able to download all this stuff?
Yeah.
How is that
Exactly.
allowed?
Yeah, that would be my first question, like how? And it's also the importance of why. So
Mm-hmm.
it's all very well saying, yeah, you mustn't install the software. Well, why? Well, what does
Yeah,
it mean? And then that will hopefully resonate with those people. And those who still fight back, well, then you can look at further steps.
yeah,
Because maybe then they are more likely to be those malicious rogue employees for whatever
yeah.
reason.
And it was
As
interesting
long as it,
because the US CERT studies, they looked at all the cases that had happened of insider threat, and there's basically 3 attacks from intentional insiders that happen. There's sabotage, which is, you can imagine what that is. There's theft, which is usually theft of
yeah,
like sensitive information or IP, and then there's fraud. And what's really interesting is, of the sabotage cases, almost 100% of them were cybersecurity people. Because who has the ability to sabotage a company? You have
yep,
to work in development, you have to work in IT, you have to work as a system admin, you had to work as whatever, right? Like, you can't do it if you work in HR. Like, that's pretty difficult. So all of the cases involving sabotage were our were our people. So it's interesting because, yeah,
yeah, yeah. And if you're thinking about it, don't do it,
don't
please.
do it. It's probably not going to end
Even,
well for
even
you.
if the company is rubbish and treating you like rubbish, go find another role.
Yeah,
You'll
go
go to
blast someone's
jail. It's
Glassdoor
not
like
worth it.
everybody else.
Exactly. So it's not worth it.
It's not worth
Um,
it.
Go work for a company that treats you well. It's far better. And you'll be much happier. And you won't have any regrets.
No.
That's the important thing. Yeah, doing bad things to companies, even though they're not the best companies in the world. Thankfully, most companies are decent. It's going to not harm them; it'll just harm you.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Definitely.
So yeah, it's interesting, and I think certainly as I've noticed in the industry, like the move away from the more traditional development type style and deployment and that to things like DevOps and um, continuous deployments and that it is placed a lot more power in the hands of your people like your developers and that. So there is a lot more risk in terms of people doing bad things. But it is interesting to note as that's gone up, there hasn't been an increase, or as far as I know, a significant increase in malicious insider threats, which is pretty good to see.
Yeah. I think they're rare. I think when they do happen, they're probably the worst possible thing that can happen to your company. So I think the
Yeah,
damage is absolutely enormous if they happen. So that's why they need to
but
be on your risk register, right? Because the damage is so great if they were to happen.
and again, I think the damage is largely because you then don't have those controls in place. So you get
Yeah.
asked those questions. Well, how could they do that?
Mm-hmm.
Like the intern who managed to get the entire company breached. Well, why is the intern responsible for?
Yeah,
If a
yeah.
company can have their data breached by intern, then why is the intern in that position?
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. So it's people look at not the intern's fault, the company's fault, because the
Yeah.
company put the intern, if it was the intern, in that position that they should never have been able to do any of that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I
Again,
agree.
yeah, controls and all that. It'll be actually, I don't think we'll ever find out the answer, but it would be interesting to see how many insider threats, whether intentional or unintentional, were actually thwarted by controls around it.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you would never know because, well, I suppose the companies would know, but they wouldn't release
Yeah,
that publicly. But
probably
yeah, it's interesting.
interesting. Yeah, cool. I don't think I have any other topics.
Does anyone else have any
Right.
topics? Anyone who's on, any questions? Or, I mean, obviously, if you post something really horrible, we'd probably just ignore it, to be honest, and pretend you didn't post it. Yep.
I did get this shirt.
If you go out wearing that, do people throw things at you?
I don't know. Look at it. Flat Earth Society.
What does it say at the bottom?
Members around the globe.
Members around the globe. Oh god, it annoys me so much.
Sorry. Yep. Speaking of which,
I know I haven't got any. I'm sorry. Next time, I promise.
next time. Damn it. See how you bought a shirt
I was
for this.
going to have had a crazy week and I just kind of didn't have enough time today. To be honest, I'm quite amazed I'm actually even here, if I'm honest. But yeah, so next time.
That's actually a topic which no one else is bringing up. Workloads.
Oh yeah.
So it's something that's quite, like, I know myself, at the moment I'm absolutely slammed. Like, it's just insane the amount of work that I have. Sounds like you're the same.
Yeah.
It seems like an industry thing, where we just have an insane amount of workload. I guess it kind of also comes back to that very first topic, like where people are the security team, blah blah blah. We're doing the best that we can, and the workloads are just insane, and we're trying to juggle so many things. So you now have a incident, and it just makes that 100 times worse.
Yeah.
How do we solve this?
I don't know. So my situation is that basically July, August, and then December, January, very few of my clients want me anywhere in person, which is great because it means I can work remotely from basically anywhere in the world with internet. So I tend to take that opportunity to go away. Obviously, it's not really a holiday. I take time off in that time, but I have to work. But I find the other times is absolutely insane. Like September, October, and November, I don't think I have a day off, like until basically November now. And it's very difficult to, I find for me, and it's a bit unique for me because I own my own business, but I find it very difficult to say no to things. And I see it as, well, I should be doing, like, maybe I should be doing this. And I've got to try and be better at that because, like today, like this week, basically I've been all over the place. And then today I've delivered 5 hours worth of briefings to boards virtually, on top of doing all the rest of my admin, all the rest of the stuff I have to do, and then joining this at like 8 o'clock now. And there's still more stuff to do. So it's Friday and I should be like, okay, well, that's that. I'm going to take the weekend and enjoy my weekend. I know I'm not going to do that because I've got too much to do for Monday. And what happens is that I find very quickly, like usually over a period of like 3 or 4 weeks of working like that, I'll start like showing signs that the stress is really getting to me. And the one sign recently was I put the microwave on, and the sound of the beeping when the microwave was done made me cry. And I was like, this isn't good. This is not a good sign of mental stability. We probably need a day off. But I think, like, I was talking to someone the other day, why is it in InfoSec that we need to get to that point? Like, that's too far. Like, if you're crying at the microwave, that's a bad warning sign. Yeah. You're very close to the cliff edge. Why do we have to get to the cliff edge is the question.
I think it's because we're quite passionate about what we do. Not many other industries that people spend so much of their free time willingly helping. Like, what other industry openly, willingly spends free time to do work that could potentially, very unlikely, but still, if you look at it as a outsider, we're doing work to stop bad guys. That's our that's roles within our companies, and then we're spending our time outside doing work to stop bad guys. So we literally do work outside of our work to put us out of work. Hopefully it does, well, not ever thankfully, but it works such that we don't ever have to worry about that. But if you look at it from that point of view, um,
Yeah.
it's I always like scratch my head like we do work voluntary to do work to put ourselves to have less work in a company, which is
Yeah.
kind of weird. Like all the tools we put it out, all the free tools, all the talks, all that kind of stuff. Um, and I think it's largely down just to a passion. Like I, I've worked in development for numerous years, and there wasn't ever that passion where you happily go and spend a weekend doing
Hmm.
things or yeah. So I think that's a large part of the thing why we kind of work ourselves
Yeah.
to a point of
Yeah.
almost burnout and exhaustion.
And I think it also doesn't help that instead of people kind of celebrating people who are taking a break, we're kind of celebrating the people who don't take a break ever. Do you know what I mean? So it kind of then puts a bit of pressure like, oh, I ought to be doing this or I ought to be doing that. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Um, there's also a question around the skills gap or skills shortage. Um, but I'll give my opinion on it. What are your opinions? Because this is obviously very much related to this.
Um, I think we need to do more to encourage people into cyber at a young level. Because I think the problem that we've ended up in is a lot of companies are buying talent. So they'll up the salary and they'll try and steal talent from another company. But that doesn't solve the problem. All you're doing is poaching. The bigger companies get to poach the talent from the smaller companies, and there's no talent to replace that. So you're basically just racking the salaries higher and higher and higher and higher and expecting the experience to go higher. Whereas I think if companies invested in apprenticeship schemes and things to really encourage young people into cyber, you'd end up kind of moving people up through those ranks. But at the current state of affairs, I think a lot of the stuff is basically kind of recruiting people with 3 years experience, but everyone can't have 3 years experience. Do you know what I mean?
There's a point to that I'm going to make because I'm in this position. I would love to recruit um, uh, apprentices and or people out of university. But in my current position, there's no way that I can. I simply cannot do that because I don't have the time to help skill them up.
Mm,
So you're going to have a case of these people coming in, working on something, and having zero support, which is
mm-hmm.
not fair on them. Um, and that's, I think, a predicament of a lot of companies. They, if the chance was there, they would love to, but they just don't have the capacity to support that. So again, it's not a black and white answer. Like there's larger companies who do have that capacity, and they certainly should. And there's a lot of companies out there who do support it. But there's smaller companies who have smaller teams, and they just can't. There's no way. Like you know me, I love helping people, but in my team right now, there's no way I can ever think of having um, a person fresh out of university, just simply
Mm-hmm.
because I wouldn't be in a position to support them. Maybe in a few years' time, once we've become stable on that, maybe. But yeah, and I think the other problem around the skills gap is everyone treats the skills gap as one, like it's a single job. There's different areas of cybersecurity,
Mm-hmm.
and those different areas have different skills shortages or surplus or whatever. I know from my side, looking for application security people is extremely difficult, especially if you start going up in the kind of seniority level. It is difficult to find people. Whereas I don't know, pen testers or maybe I certainly had more CVs through with people with pen testing skills. That's maybe a bit easier to find. So we've got to stop treating the skills gap shortage as an industry thing and rather focus on the different areas within it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think within that, even in the UK, for instance, there's a lot of like inequality in terms of what we can do. So, for example, what I mean by that is that a lot of the talent is harbored by the big companies, the big financial services companies who have, 1,000-strong teams of cybersecurity people. Then if you look further down that chain to like smaller companies, dentists, things like that, they don't have cybersecurity people at all. And then you look at people like farms who have lots of digitalization, lots of automation. They don't have a CISO. They don't have cybersecurity teams. They don't have any security whatsoever. So we've got this like real gap, I think, not just a skills gap within organizations, but generally in the country, where we've got loads of talent concentrated in the banks and then nothing else anywhere else, and I think that's another problem that we have.
Yeah, it's very, very accurate. So yeah, it's a difficult challenge that I don't think is going to be solved anytime soon. But one thing I will say is, like, if you are passionate about trying to resolve the skills gap, certainly apprenticeship programs in the company will be a way. But as I said, not always possible. So outside of that, help people. I've been mentoring someone, and it's really encouraging to see them grow and flourish in their current role. So
Yeah.
there are still ways outside your current role to do it if you can. And it doesn't have to involve a lot of time. It could be a couple of hours a week or something like that.
Yeah.
And that will make a big difference.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely. I think there's one more question in the chat about Azure, which is more for you than it is for me.
Yeah. Certification.
Maybe not.
Sorry, I am not good with Azure. I'm more a AWS, and even my AWS is not great. So Sparkly, unfortunately, I don't know the answer to your question. If anyone knows the answer, can you please give a shout out? I imagine like Microsoft might have a bunch of certifications.
That's true.
So yeah, I would look to Microsoft and see if there's things there. Other resources that might be worth looking at. I know Cloud Guru does a bunch of training for cloud and security. So that might be another area to look to. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't know. It's not an area that I don't think I've ever used Azure, to be honest.
No, it's not my area either.
Nope. But hopefully that helps. If not, just give us a shout on Twitter and we can try to
find someone.
Out. Yeah, someone out there is going to know. Dan Card's probably the now to ask.
Yeah, probably that's true. Actually, it probably
the answer to that. Cool. All right. I don't think we have any other topics.
No, if you have any topics that you want us to discuss next month, drop us a message or LinkedIn or anything like that. And we'll add them to the list of topics. And hopefully there's not any other big breach between now and October. There probably will be. It almost certainly will be, to be fair, but you can hope.
I'm more worried about software vulnerabilities like Log4j coming out. Those are fun.
That's like the Friday before Christmas that's going to happen. You can't reveal like major vulnerabilities until like the worst possible time. That's the rule.
Yeah. Hopefully this year we'll get our Christmas and it'll be fine and there'll be nothing, because last year was LastPass. The year before was Log4j.
Every year.
SolarWinds. So at least last year wasn't so bad with LastPass. It was a thing, but it wasn't that bad. Not on the level. It
certainly wasn't that bad in December. Like it was known to be worse, but like in the new year. So it was like, okay.
We kind of got a free pass, kind of. So hopefully this year we'll get a
free Christmas.
Quiet one. Yeah. And happy Christmas, everyone. Mince pies are already in the shops. So
no. God, I hate Christmas so much.
I'm happy. I like mince pies, so I can go start eating mince pies again.
Yeah, that's true. I do like mince pies, so I'm a bit of a hypocrite. I like mince pies, but I absolutely hate Christmas. So
those in the US who may not know what mince pies are, in the UK, they're like little pastries with fruit. So the mince is the fruit with it's not any meat. It's fruit with like, I don't know, it's
raisins, sweet. I think
raisins,
like sultanas or something. Yeah,
you can get ones with icing on, and that they're great. Mince pies are awesome.
Yeah.
So if you see people going on about eating mince pies and coffee, it's not meat. It's
Yeah, we're not eating meat with our coffee. That's not what we're doing.
So
But I
yeah,
do think if people think that's what we're doing, we look edgier.
maybe. Hardcore.
Yeah, exactly. Hardcore.
But yeah, hopefully it's been interesting for those who joined. Thanks for everyone for joining. Appreciate the support and the comments and the questions. Keep them coming. And if you, yeah, as Lisa said, catch us on the next one. Send us ideas. And yeah, otherwise, enjoy your weekend, everyone. Hope it's a great one.
See you in October.
Yeah, see you in October. Bye.
Bye.